When did you meet him? And then let's talk about An American Werewolf in London and that incredible transformation that also nowadays seems so incredible.
Well, back in the day, now there are makeup supply stores and stuff like that. And when I was doing this, I would have to drive all over Los Angeles to different places to get a bag of plaster. And they didn't have like small, like polyurethane foam. You would have to buy a 55-gallon drum, and I needed a quart, There was a place called Don Post Studios that made Halloween masks, high-end Halloween masks. Back in the 60s, they were $35, which was way beyond anything I could afford, but I always coveted those masks, And I would go to Don Post Studios to buy supplies. They would pour some polyurethane foam in an old paint can. They didn't tell you that it made cyanide gas when it foams up, And I was doing this in my bedroom and I almost had to go to the hospital. My throat closed up and stuff. But anytime I went to Don Post Studios, I brought photos of what I'd done, and it's the only time in my life when I actually had a business card. I think it said Rick Baker, Monster Maker, and I gave him the business card. So John wrote this movie called Schlop, he had to do, there was a movie called Trog, which Joan Crawford was in very late in her life, and it was a pretty terrible movie. It was kind of sad to see Joan Crawford in this shitty movie. In fact, she wore her own wardrobe that she brought from her house and had to change her clothes in her car. It was kind of on scale with the Octoman, And John goes, I want to make a movie with a shitty ape in it and make fun of this movie. John had worked as a mailboy at 20th Century Fox, and he knew John Chambers, who did the original Planet of the Apes makeup. One of the great makeup artists at the time. And he went to John Chambers first and goes, I need a gorilla suit for my movie, And John said, well, that'll cost about $100,000. I think John had $60,000, which I usually say 6, but yes, 60 makes more sense. And he goes, yeah, there's no way. And John goes, I can't afford that. So he goes, and John is, was thrown out of almost every school that he went to. He's hyperactive, ADHD kind of guy, real high energy and loud, so he went to Don Post Studios, and I think he scared everybody at Don Post Studios, and they didn't want to deal with him, and they also gave a big bid. But they said, there's a kid that comes in here that does some pretty good stuff, and maybe you should contact him. So I got a call from this madman, and I had the Octoman under my belt. I'd done one movie, he came out to my parents' house, into my bedroom workshop, and I'd never met anybody quite like John, and I still was very shy at the time. And my bedroom was my special place. I had my masks and my work tables and photos of great makeups on the wall, And John comes in and goes, he was using the F word all over the place, and was super excited and loud and like touching my stuff, and I'm going, I don't like this, and he goes, this shit is really good, this look is just like, this is fucking good as John Chambers stuff, and it was like, and I go, my mom's in the other room, you shouldn't use those words, But he kind of changed, when he saw this thing, he goes, okay, maybe I don't want a shitty gorilla suit anymore, I want something that looks good, So I had, I think, 6 weeks in a deferred payment of $2,000. But he paid me, I think I had $500 materials to build this. And like I said, I was 20 at the time, and I still haven't seen that deferred payment. And I'm starting to think I'm never going to see it. But it changed my life. I had a great time working with John. John played the ape man in the film and directed the film in makeup and wrote the film. And he had already written American Werewolf in London, and one of the days when I was making him up was telling me the whole story, and we were both fans of the Wolfman transformation and Jekyll and Hyde transformation. But John said, it didn't make sense to him that you would sit still in a chair like Lon Chaney Jr. while you're transformed when your body went through this metamorphosis. So he goes, I want him to be able to move, and I want to show the pain. I think it would be a painful process, and I want to show that. And it's going to take place in a girl's apartment, and it's going to be brightly lit, you know. It's like, oh man, you know, how much harder can this be, you know? But he said, how would you do it? And I said, I have no idea, but I would love to have the opportunity. And he said, well, start thinking about it, because it's going to be my next movie, you know. And I was obsessed with the concept of doing that. And fortunately for me, Schlock was not a big hit, and it took 10 years before we got the money to make American Werewolf. So I had a really long time to think about how I was going to do this, you know. And it really, and John is a really smart filmmaker. He's prepared. You know what you're going to do on the day. We storyboarded the whole transformation. I explained to him that, well, this one, there's how many have you seen American Werewolf? Anybody here have seen it?
Yeah.
Well, you should go see it. This was 45 years ago when I did this, but I lost track of where I was going. Can I take a nap now?
I don't really got my needs.
But we storyboarded it all, planned it out, and I said, this particular makeup, there's one scene where his body is stretched out and he has kind of a dog-like rib cage and a long torso and a dog-like legs. And poor David Naughton, who was the actor that went through the transformation, we actually had a raised set, kind of like this, with a hole cut in it. And David's head and arms are sticking out of the hole, and I had made up this whole fake body that extends that. And I said, this is going to take a long time to do, and John said, let's shoot the whole transformation in post-production. He goes, this set will be pre-lit. I can come in with just a camera operator and maybe a grip, and you can take as much time as it takes to do the makeup, So we had the wrap party for the film, and then we had a week to film the transformation, and we would only do 1 or 2 stages a day. And it was just a smart way to make the film, And we also, in the film, was a huge chaos of the werewolf running through Piccadilly Circus with a bus crash and all this very typical John Landis chaos. And we only had a few hours. They said, you can shoot in Piccadilly Circus. You have to be in and out in a few hours. And that was not an easy thing to do, because just the cleanup was a long time, But John, they, like I said, planned it out, and they actually built a set in a different location that kind of looked like some of the buildings in Piccadilly Circus. So we went and got the big master shots, and then we shot the rest on that other set, But John changed my life. I mean, American Werewolf really put me on the map, That's where I got my first Oscar. I met my wife Sylvia on a John Landis movie called Into the Night, and I had gotten a divorce from my first wife. She, rightfully so, I was basically married to my job, and she wanted more of a companion than I was at that point. And I was in the dark days of my life, and John says, I want you to be in this movie. And it originally was like a Jesus freak that was selling religion on Hollywood Boulevard. And I had long brown hair and a full beard and looked very much like Jesus. But because of the divorce, I kind of was going through trauma, so I cut my hair for the first time in years and shaved my beard. And I thought, well, that'll be all right if I'm, a lot of religious people are clean cut, And so I only had a couple lines, but it was in a scene with Jeff Goldblum and Michelle Pfeiffer, and I didn't want to screw this up, so I really made sure I memorized these few lines. So I show up on Hollywood Boulevard, and they kind of panicked when they saw what I looked like, and they went, you know what, I think we're going to change you to a dope dealer instead, why don't you say this? And it's like, and my wife Sylvia was the hairstylist on the movie, and John Landis came into the makeup trailer one day and goes, I want you to be in the movie, I want you to play the part you were born to play. She goes, what part is that? And he said, a hooker. I was in a scene, I met my wife on Hollywood Boulevard in front of this trashy lingerie place, myself being a dope dealer and she's a hooker, And we have a still that the still man took of the night that we met, and John sent me that still, and I was still in kind of a dark place, but I looked at it and went, she's kind of cute. And she, she wore a little tank top and like a little mini skirt and had nice abs, and she also got the still. And then she started stalking me. That's my